Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Dangerous Thoughts on a Safe Space. I'm Carter Laren, and that was Beverly's new countdown video, which apparently is not sized properly for the screen. Sorry for the delay, everyone. Thank you guys for showing up today. I was going to be speaking with special guest Sal the Agorist today, but he hasn't shown up, which is unusual. I know Sal, he's a good guy, so I hope he's okay. But maybe he'll pop in. If he doesn't pop in, we'll talk about agorism, but I'm not an expert, so we'll talk about it together. And if you guys have anything particular you want to chat about, even if it's not agorism, I guess today is going to be a good day for you to just throw stuff in chat, and I will wing it on the application of philosophy. I usually like to prep, so cut me some slack today, because I'm not prepped for a solo show. Okay. But before we kind of continue and talk about any stuff, if you get any value out of these shows generally, any kind of show on Unsafe Space, please take a moment to go hit the subscribe button. It costs you nothing. It does help us. Share the stuff with a friend. Find an episode of Dangerous Thoughts or another Unsafe Space series that you like and share it with someone. You can go to unsafespace.com to support the channel. You can use Bitcoin or Ethereum if you so desire. Plus, if you have a bunch of worthless fiat currency, we'll take that too. Just $5 a month will get your name in the credits, and the rewards get even more exciting after that, if you can believe it. And to those of you who already support Unsafe Space and all that we do and all the shows here, thank you so much. It really does matter to us. I know it seems like it doesn't take any effort to do some stuff sometimes, but it does take a lot of effort to do all this stuff and put it out. And we've got several shows, and people do like to eat and pay mortgages. So it does mean a lot, that support you guys give. So as many of you know, Dangerous Thoughts is usually broadcast live every Wednesday evening. And the primary purpose of this series is to defend, preserve, promote the crucial life-affirming ideas that are responsible for the success of Western civilization. And by that, I mean the epistemology of reason and the ethics of individualism. And often that means I'm just here on camera discussing things like how to apply rational philosophy to current events. But sometimes I interview people. Today was going to be one of those days where I bring someone on, or as our friend Kamala Harris would say,
it is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. Every day it is time for us to agree.
Sorry, I had to play that. I just like it so much. I know it's old. So anyway, people in the Unsafe Space community have been asking about building alternate communities in real life. And there's lots of talk about alternate communities, alternate solutions for tech online, Gab, Getter, Parler, Minds, all that kind of stuff, Truth Social. But the important stuff in life happens offline. At least it should. So a lot of people have asked, hey, how do we start building communities offline? What do we do? What do we actually do to build? I don't know if I should call it a counterculture or whatever. Now, I'm not an expert here. But you guys want me to go figure stuff out. So usually that's what I do. My plan today was to, look, there's lots of aspects of a counterculture, of an alternate culture, everything from education to entertainment to whatever. But one of the most important is off-grid economics, or maybe you would call it counter-economics or whatever. So the plan today was to kick off our exploration of alternative communities with a discussion of agorism by speaking to someone who can help explain what agorism is and maybe talk about the economic side. But as I mentioned, Sal is not here. If he shows up, I will ask him questions. But in the meantime, I guess we'll just have to wade through this. So I apologize for the lack of prep, but let's just start with some basic stuff. Let's start with what agorism, or I hear people pronounce it agorism, what it is. And you hear it mixed up with this concept of counter economics quite a lot. Um, and at this point, by the way, I'm speaking with no notes, so I'm sorry if I'm not going to be as articulate as normal. My understanding of agorism is if you take the totality of human action and human interaction in a society, and you subtract out that which the state regulates or is involved in, and you subtract out that which is prohibited philosophically through the initiation of use of force, like theft. What you have left over is agorism, which I know this sounds like a weird negative definition, but that's my kind of understanding of agorism. And what that means is, well, often this is tied, is intertwined pretty deeply with something called counter-economics. And I think counter-economics is often described as like gray markets or black markets or whatever, but I think agorist activity generally is anything that's not allowed, right? Uh, and that might be paying the kid next door to mow your lawn, but not paying like whatever employment taxes and whatever else need to like happen there. That's a form of agorism. Trading with someone and not like, I think technically when you exchange goods, you're technically supposed to pay sales tax. You're supposed to calculate the values and blah blah blah. Like doing that is a form of agorism. So these are all things that would probably fall under the category of gray market stuff. And then there's obvious black market stuff. So Adam says Sal is on a troika being transported to Siberia. Yeah, poor Sal. Someday, if he's not careful, he's going to find himself doing that. Maybe he's not here because he's been practicing too much agorism, or I think he pronounces it agorism, but I hear both ways. By the way, I am paying attention to chat in particular today. So if you have stuff you want to talk about or comments, let me know. Anyway, let's go into counter economics. I printed out this little pamphlet. I don't know if you can see it. It says counter economics, what it is and how it works. And this, so I guess the guy who invented this is a guy named Sam Konkin. He was like a libertarian-esque thinker. I think agorists get accused of being left libertarian. In fact, the back of this pamphlet says movement of libertarian left. But my understanding is the reason for that is Sam Konkin said he was more left than Rothbard, Murray Rothbard, but he said that after Murray Rothbard had kind of aligned with the right. So there's not a lot of stuff that's really leftist in here. Although I guess if you're a cultural conservative, you might think some of this is lefty. But let me just I'll read some bits of this, and this will kick off our discussion, I guess. So what is counter-economics? The counter-economy is the sum of all, this is kind of what I was saying before, the sum of all non-aggressive human action, which is forbidden by the state. That's much more succinct than my definition. Counter-economics is the study of the counter-economy and its practices. The counter-economy includes the free market, the black market, the underground economy, the acts of civil and social disobedience, all acts of forbidden association, sexual, racial, cross-religious, and anything else the state at any place or time chooses to prohibit, control, regulate, tax, or tariff. The counter-economy excludes all state-approved action, the white market, and the red market, violence and theft not approved by the state. A counter-economist is either a student of counter-economics or, most often, a practitioner. To some extent, all of us are counter-economic. It is impossible to obey all government laws and edicts. Many are contradictory and be alive. And then it says it's also forbidden to die without state permission. I assume they mean suicide here. Anyway, I won't read the whole thing, but they go on to list some other things that count as counter economic activity. And I don't know when this was printed, but oddly enough, one of the things on the list is trucker convoys. So maybe this was printed quite recently or updated recently. But gold bugs, food hoarders, because it's illegal to not report stuff, a lot of that. People who own weapons that are prohibited by the state. Let's see, health nuts, i.e. those who produce or market nourishment unapproved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Some stuff that, a lot of people would say should be bad, like, they don't like pornographers, prostitutes, and other, it calls them sexual entrepreneurs. A smuggler of Bibles to Saudi Arabia or drugs to New York. Anyone who's ever smoked a joint, even if he regretted it as one running for office. Anyone who has ever committed any, anyone who's ever, these are all blue laws now. But they list a bunch of blue laws. If you violate them, I guess you're an agorist in that sense. Bartenders who fail to report transactions. The idea here, it seems to be, I guess there's a few ideas. One of these is kind of practical with agorism, and the other is kind of philosophical. My philosophical understanding here is that the end goal of an agorist is maybe similar to that of a someone who would call themselves an anarcho-capitalist, or just a voluntarist. But the agorist, I think, is particularly interested in entrepreneurial activity, because, and not for the sake of profit necessarily, although the agorists are, obviously for profit. They like for profit. But there's a kind of subversive and political goal with being an entrepreneur as an agorist, because you have power you have more control economically to operate outside the system. And so I think, that's kind of my high level understanding. Let's go into some concerns that I have with advocating this, stuff that I probably was hoping to talk to Sal about. So one is, my understanding is, my understanding would be that minimizing your tax contribution would be one of the goals of agorism, because agorism is like intentionally politically disruptive. It's not just, we want to operate outside the system and please leave us alone state. It's like we want to not be funding the state. We want to be doing things against the funding of the state to try and weaken the state. Now, obviously, there's ways you can lighten your tax burden legally, without risk of jail time, right? So if you're a 2-income household and you pay a daycare center for to watch your children, if you run the math on how much that costs you after taxes, and then I don't think you can deduct daycare, but if you run the math on how much that costs you and how much you spend going to and from work, and you might determine that actually, if one of you quits your jobs and watches the children, you might not lose as much money as you think, and you would greatly reduce your tax burden. You might in fact have a more fulfilling and happy life, and get to spend some time and raise your own children instead of leaving them to a third party. So in my understanding, that would be a small step that you would take towards agorism. Well, I would say a low risk step, in terms of no one's going to throw you in jail for not working, right? They're not, the IRS isn't going to be like, well, hey, you were paying us taxes, but now you're not working, so to jail with you. So that's like a safe way to do agorism. And then I think there's the gray market stuff, the paying your neighbor's kid to mow the lawn under the table. Obviously, that the risk of jail time with some of that stuff is pretty low. So I guess you could do that. I guess if you start building a community of like-minded individuals, you can do trade. You can trade stuff back and forth with each other, and that's not Technically you might be in the gray market there, or owing taxes, but if you're not paying them, you're unlikely to get caught or in trouble. I think from what I can tell, where people get in the most trouble is, so here's the problem I have with agorism from a practical perspective. Because morally, sure, of course, it's fine. But from a practical perspective, one of my concerns with it is, in order to really have anywhere resembling the lifestyle that we have now, like if you're a normal person who works and has a mortgage and watches Netflix or whatever, like has computers and pays the internet and is does normal things, has a car and drives. If you're a normal person like that, it's very difficult. You can't replicate that lifestyle at all through barter. Like that's not possible. You need a medium of exchange. And even if you have a medium of exchange like dollars, or let's say you use Ethereum or Bitcoin or something like that, you need a marketplace. You need a place where you can exchange. Like if I said, if you had to go out and talk to the people and figure out who has, gala apples. Let's say you like gala apples, or if there wasn't a supermarket and you had to just go find the apples, it would be very difficult. Your life would be significantly reduced. The quality of your life would be significantly reduced. So marketplaces are super, super important. People often deride the middleman and saying, "Oh, you don't do anything. You're just, you're just gathering a bunch of stuff together in one place and reselling it and marking it up. You leech." But that's not true at all. Marketplaces are the reason you have a higher standard of living. Middlemen are super, super important. I mean, obviously, sometimes they can gouge you, and sometimes there's like 3 middlemen, and some of them are useless. But in general, you need marketplaces. And what I've seen in in agorist circles is that's where the feds go. They go after the marketplaces, and those are the people that get in the most trouble. So let's take a look at Silk Road as an example. Does everyone know? I assume you guys know what Silk Road was, but maybe I'll explain. This was maybe 10 years ago, it was a while ago. Silk Road. It was part of the dark web, which the dark web is basically just the web, but you access it a different way. DNS doesn't work. It's which is domain name server stuff. It's harder to access. And I haven't been on the dark web in, probably since Silk Road was on the dark web. And I was on Silk Road. I didn't buy anything, but it was one of those curiosities, like, oh, what is this? What's going on? So Silk Road was a marketplace. It was kind of like eBay for the dark web, and people could buy and sell things on the dark web. And it was set up so that it was it was trying to anonymize payments using crypto, and it was set up specifically to be an anonymous marketplace. And it was full of drugs. It was just full of drugs. It was all, it wasn't all drugs, but it was a lot of drugs. It was a lot of drugs, and a lot of people bought and sold drugs, right on Silk Road, and it's fascinating to see, right? I was too straight edged, I guess, to take advantage of it, but it was fascinating to see. And the feds didn't like this, clearly. And in the name of the war on drugs, you had, I think it was the FBI who primarily infiltrated and became a party to several transactions on Silk Road, and tried to figure their way out, figure out what was going on. And I don't know, maybe they probably went after some of the drug dealers. I'm sure they did. But guess who they went after the most? The dude who ran Silk Road, the guy who set it up. He wasn't selling drugs. He wasn't doing any of that stuff. All he was doing was making a marketplace. That's who they went after. And again, like I said, marketplace is necessary. You need a marketplace. And all he did was make a marketplace that allowed this kind of stuff. And his name was Ross Ulbright, who you may have heard of. I'll just read this from an article about Ross. Ulbright was 31 when he was 31 with you. This is actually an article. This is from the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. This is a press release from the federal government. Ulbright created Silk Road on January 2011 and owned and operated the underground website until it was shut down by law enforcement authorities in October 2013. So think about that. It's like, let's see, January 2011. So it's almost 3 years. So like not quite 3 years. Silk Road emerged as the most sophisticated and extensive criminal marketplace on the internet, serving as a sprawling black market bazaar where unlawful goods and services, including illegal drugs of all varieties, were bought and sold regularly by the site's users. Blah, blah, blah. Ulbright deliberately operated Silk Road as an online criminal marketplace. They talk about how he deliberately used the Onion router and Tor network to evade detection and Bitcoin-based payment system. The vast majority of items for sale on Silk Road were illegal drugs, which were openly advertised on the site. As of September 23rd, 2013, the Silk Road homepage displayed nearly 13,000 listings for controlled substances, listed under each category as cannabis, dissociatives, ecstasy, intoxicants, opioids, precursors, I don't even know what that is, prescription, psychedelics, and stimulants. By the way, his online moniker was Dread Pirate Roberts. I always liked that. Before we knew his name, he was known as Dread Pirate Roberts. Through his ownership and operation of Silk Road, Ulbright reaped commissions worth more than $13 million generated from the illicit sales conducted through the site. Ulbright, 31 of San Francisco. So he was accused of soliciting murder for hire, but I don't think that stuck. And who knows? I don't trust the federal government or feds or any of these charges. I don't trust half the charges. Ulbright, 31 of San Francisco, California, was convicted of the following 7 offenses after a 4-week jury trial: distributing narcotics by means of internet, conspiring to distribute narcotics. Thanks for the 3 law violations for one thing. Engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, conspiring to commit computer hacking, conspiring to traffic in false identity documents, and conspiring to commit money laundering. In addition to the life sentence prison term, life sentence, 31-year-old guy. In addition to the life sentence prison term, Ulbright was ordered to forfeit $183 million. Now, they said he made $13 million. I don't know how you forfeit an order of magnitude more than you made. 2 orders of magnitude more. Or sorry, 1 order of magnitude. But I don't know. In imposing the sentence, Judge Forrest said, "There must be no doubt that lawlessness will not be tolerated. There must be no doubt that no one is above the law, no matter one's education or privileges. All stand equal before the law. There must be no doubt that you cannot run a massive criminal enterprise and, because it occurred over the internet, minimize the crime committed on that basis." So Ross got screwed. So my concern with agorism is, okay, we can do safe things like minimize our tax burden. Maybe we can even do iffy things, theoretically, like pay people under the table or whatever. But for day-to-day operations, you need a marketplace. If you actually want to have the standard of living or anything close to your standard of living that you have now, you need marketplaces to pop up. And I guess maybe selling illegal drugs on the marketplace is the dumb way to start. because it means that they're going to use drug laws against you. But I imagine if he had been selling fruits and vegetables or, diapers or anything else, and allowing people to do it anonymously and to evade sales tax and everything else, they would probably also come after him. So yeah, so that's my concern with something like. So the guy got a life sentence, right? How many people who sold cocaine or whatever was for sale on that site, how many of those people got life sentences, right? Ross got the life sentence. A 31-year-old dude got a life sentence for running a website, which, granted, broke laws, I guess. But and none of the charges I listed, if you'll notice, he didn't. I know there's allegations that he hired, he tried to hire hitman or something. Like, I've heard that rumor floating around. It was in this thing I just read, but he wasn't convicted of that. So money laundering, conspiring to commit money laundering, conspiring to traffic in false identities, conspiring to commit hacking. It's like, it's all okay. Well, a bunch of conspiring stuff. And the other thing that I think is difficult about agorism is it seems to rely on a lot of under the radar activity, and we are in an increasing surveillance state right now. We saw what they did to the Freedom Convoy. We saw they freeze the assets of people who maybe even gave money to the Freedom Convoy. We see it. We see what they're doing to Russian oligarchs. Now, you can hate Russian oligarchs all you want, but many of these Russian oligarchs are not really clearly guilty of anything. Some of them have even said they don't like the war in Ukraine, but their assets are being seized, and it's being bragged about. So you clearly have a government that's not only has the capability of shutting you out of give access to your economics, but it's also willing to do so for political reasons. So so that you have that increased surveillance and control, which I think makes it even more difficult to operate unless you're using alternative currency, which we can talk about. And you're also seeing more and more honeypots. You're seeing more and more FBI honeypots. The kidnapping of Governor Whitmer is an example. I think something like roughly 50% of the people or something involved were FBI agents, right? So I think the risk here with agorism really being able to be anything more than if it's a small subculture that can be ignored and it's a few people doing some things, I don't think government's going to come after, or maybe they can get away with it. But if everyone starts to do it, if it really rises up to be a thing, if you end up with a Silk Road, but not illegal substances, but still a Silk Road, which you would need to do this, I don't see how that doesn't get taken out by the feds. Am I wrong? I don't know. Do people? Am I being too pessimistic about that? Let me know in chat. Someone in chat says, I'm not sure, but almost any kind of transaction can be interpreted as a business under certain conditions, but those are gray areas. Yeah, and also everything is trafficking. Like if you hand someone anything, like everything is trafficking. Trafficking is like it covers all manner of interaction. Any kind of interaction they'll classify as trafficking, which sounds scary and bad, but it's just trafficking, or they it's just exchanging stuff. Now, according to my notes here, there are two major strategies to agorism. Two basic strategies. One is vertical or introverted agorism. Whatever that is, I'm already attracted to it because it's introverted. And the other is horizontal or extroverted agorism. And let's just look up. We'll look up what these are. Let's see. Vertical, or this is just Wikipedia, guys. Vertical or introverted strategy is aimed towards individuals concentrating on decentralized local infrastructure as opposed to expansive state foundations, as explained thusly. What this means in real terms is to create local or neighborhood networks of self-reliance where people in the vicinity get together to find ways to produce whatever is necessary for survival and a good life. It means creating local production facilities and markets with no effective state regulations and without the state's knowledge. Again, I like that. Sounds great. I like that idea. Can you imagine an unsafe space community where we are all somehow um, co-located and doing stuff? That's great. But realistically, when your iPhone breaks or your phone breaks or some electronic piece of equipment breaks, what you need access to is rare earth material being mined in China, refined there, shipped to a fab, probably in Taiwan, packaged up by, you know, uh, whoever's doing the assembly. Could be in another country. Maybe that's in the U.S. if you're lucky. You can't have a town, your small town, even your big town. You can't have that. You can't have a city that's like, yep, we do that too. You can't have a city that does all that. So we're looking at a severe restriction on standard of living, even in this case here, in my opinion. The other strategy here is they call it horizontal or extroverted. By the way, this wasn't meant to be a rag on agorism show. I was just going to challenge Sal, and hopefully he has good answers to some of this. The horizontal approach, the horizontal or extroverted strategy applies to individuals actively creating black market networks and structures, which can be stretched beyond neighborhood communities, focused in the vertical strategy. So this sounds like Ross Ulbricht kind of stuff. It sounds like Silk Road. What it basically proposes is to trade with people you know and people who are recommended to you. This can all be done at whatever scale one finds appropriate using available technologies such as the internet. Ooh, the internet. Well, here, some of this makes sense. A first step could be to hire the children next door to mow the lawn or babysit. It does not have to be very sophisticated at first. This approach could come naturally to libertarians, since it simply means exercising trade without bothering with the state regulations or paying taxes. Most people are willing to exchange goods and services without registering the sales tax, which is a good start. Some of them will also find it in their interest to do this on a larger scale, producing and distributing goods and services without ever paying taxes or following unnecessary government regulations and controls. And most people really don't care about government standards if they trust their supplier. So I guess those are the strategies for agorism. There's clearly a political goal here. The only solution, so I in prep for the show and in prep to talk about this with Sal, I was thinking like, okay, are there any technologies that can solve the Ross Ulbricht problem? If you need a marketplace, by the way, I'm just spitballing now, guys. If you want a marketplace, how can you get around the Ross Ulbricht problem? And the only thing I could come up with so far is creating a decentralized autonomous organization on the blockchain. I think you could do something like that. I think you could build a company on the blockchain if you do it right, which is not managed by anyone in particular, maybe managed by some of the token holders who have governance tokens, but done so electronically and anonymously. And so there's no one to go after necessarily. I'm not sure what the feds would do in that case. Maybe they would find another way to go after them or try and go after them. I'm not sure. Maybe they would go after the individuals more and try and do that. But that might solve the Ross Ulbricht problem, where you've got one guy creating a marketplace. But I'm not totally sure. Vibrant Goo in chat says, that's what I don't get about this whole self-sufficient thing. I don't want to be a farmer. Yeah, I don't want to be a farmer either, Vibrant Goo. I would be a horrible farmer. I've tried to grow houseplants and failed miserably. So I get the self-sufficient thing in some sense, in that it's good to be able to be as self-sufficient as possible in many areas. But the truth is, if you move to the woods and you have a cabin and you raise chickens and grow food, you can live that way. You can live Little House on the Prairie style, but it's not going to be the kind of life that you imagine. If society around you falls apart, I mean, it might be a nice life in society. Like, it might be nice to do that. Maybe you enjoy it and it might be nice, and you're relatively self-sufficient and you know where your food comes from and blah, blah, blah. And then you can go, you can go to town to get the latest iPhone or upgrade your internet devices or whatever. Oh, hold on for a second. Sal just Sal's actually on his way now. So maybe, but I don't think it doesn't protect you from the collapse of society. If society collapses, it will still suck. You're not going to have a dentist, right? You're not going to get basic medicine. You're not gonna have phones. You're not gonna have a lot of stuff. So I don't see that as a viable slew. When people are like, "Oh, I'm gonna go off in the woods and be on my own," it's like, that's cool. If you want that, I get that. I have a hermit streak in myself as well, and I understand that, but I don't see that as solving the problem that you think it's solving. I think if there's an apocalypse, it's not going to be fun. Someone says, right, and growing. Oh, Vibrant Goose says, right, and growing food is a skill. Years of experience to grow one potato. Yeah, farming isn't easy. I think people assume that farming is silly and easy. It's not. I eat a lot of meat. I'd have to learn how to raise cattle and slaughter cattle, and even just butchering pieces of it. Like, sometimes I do some of our own carving up of. They'll buy chunks of. Even that's not easy. I don't have a bone saw. I guess you would need a manual bone saw if you couldn't rely on electricity, right? And then you can say, well, I'm going to have solar. Okay, what happens when it dies or breaks or whatever? You're screwed. Solar's not super easy. So, these are some of the thoughts I have. But let's bug Sal when he comes in. He's on his way. He just texted me and he said he's on his way. So he apologizes. So if you got questions, I'm going to look through chat for just a second. Is there anything, Beverly, is there anything I missed that I should, like, any comments, thoughts, or concerns that I missed? Zero Fuck says, there's a scary thing about Ethereum. I like it as a platform as far as its capabilities, but don't like it for reasons why it forked into Ethereum Classic. I actually have been looking at AVAX. I like AVAX. Just if we're going to get into crypto for a moment, you could do. It's got much, but it's also got problems, right? It's obviously pseudo distributed, but not as distributed as something like Bitcoin. So who knows? Let's see. Yeah, okay. I'm just wanting to make sure. Minda Vanderleest says, government doesn't care about drugs, but oh boy, do they care about money. Don't like anyone figuring out a way to bypass control markets. Yeah, and I think we're seeing that with crypto. Right? Biden just had, maybe this is related while we're reading on Sal. I think I have this over here, but I might not. Sorry, I got to go through my old man printouts over here. You're going to have to bear with me. But I think I have... I have a printout of this. President Biden, this is from last week. President Biden to sign executive order on ensuring responsible development of digital assets. How's the government going to ensure it's responsible? The government's the most irresponsible entity ever. So yeah, they've cracked down on crypto quite a bit, and they're planning to crack down. They're planning to crack down on crypto more. And he's talking about central bank digital currencies. Now, this is all the promises of crypto and decentralization and the freedom that crypto offered. Central bank digital currencies are the mirror image of that. They are the upside down in Stranger Things. Like they're the evil twin. They are, instead of what can technology do to enable us to get out from under the yoke of government and to have some autonomy and anonymity and decentralization, central bank digital currencies are, how can the government control you more deeply and every aspect of your life so that when you go to buy a stick of gum at the store, they can just revoke your access immediately because currency is actually controlled in the cloud by them, and it can be micromanaged, and they can, they can control you more. So this is the government's plan. I mean, he doesn't say that explicitly because he's not quite that dumb, although he's close. The executive order calls for measures to, I'm just going to read the bullet points, protect U.S. consumers, investors, and businesses. They always word it like this. We're protecting you by directing the Department of Treasury and other agency partners to assess and develop policy recommendations to address the implications of the growing digital asset sector and changes in financial. So, like, we're going to protect you by figuring out what are the rules we should apply it by gunpoint. The ordering also encourages regulators to ensure sufficient oversight and safeguard against any systemic financial risks posed by digital assets. They, by the way, whoever just wrote this in chat earlier, they freak the hell out when they're not in control of money. And maybe we'll do a show about this at some point, and maybe Sal will talk about this a little bit when he gets his setup going. He just got home or whatever. He's setting his stuff up. Money controls everything, like access to money. Like, so much of our culture has actually been affected by money, and you don't see it, you don't understand it. But which arts get funded, what, like, which research grants get issued, what regulatory bodies can do what, like, who gets the money first when it's printed, like all this stuff, who gets the money first when it's printed, that trickles all the way down to startup businesses, because venture funds, like the public markets and what they want drive what venture funds have to deliver. What venture funds want drive what angel investors have to deliver. So what angel investors want drive what startups get funded. Like it all trickles down. There's a lot of culture, like the cultural impact of federal control of the money supply is one of probably the most ignored story of how we are tax cattle and how we are managed by the federal government, and they will come after you if you threaten to fuck with that. They hate crypto. All right, second bullet point: protect U.S. and global financial stability and mitigate systemic risk by encouraging the Financial Stability Oversight Council to identify and mitigate economy-wide financial risks posed by digital assets. Oh no, the risk is they don't get taxes. That's their risk. There's a bunch more bullet points, but Sal just shut up, so we're gonna just pull them on screen. Hey man,
what's up? Can you hear me?
50 lashes with you. You owe me a Bitcoin now. Just
Dude,
one.
Holy, oh my God, I'm so sorry, man. I'll be honest with you, that happens every now and then, but it hasn't happened in a while, and I really feel like I think about it.
No, it's cool. So what we did was debunk all of Agorism while you were gone. So why don't we? Yeah, it's all good. So by the way, let me introduce Sally Mayweather, aka Sal the Agorist. What you run, well, there's sallyagorist.com, but you also have what's the new libertarian? You've got a podcast, the Agora podcast. What else? What am I missing?
So we have the New Libertarian blog, the Agora podcast, Agora threads, 3D Printer Go Burr, Anti-Politics, the book, and then a few meme pages. I've got Print Guns Not Money on Facebook, Sal the Agorist on Twitter, and there's a couple more on Snapchat, stuff like that. So
cool. All right. Everyone thought you were carted away with Trotsky to your gulag.
Yeah, close. Soon.
I thought perhaps the feds just finally got him, and we're gonna.
I'm not going alive. I that's the one thing. I might die, but I'll never wind up in jail.
Oh, okay. So I read some key points in this counter-economics pamphlet, but why don't you explain to people in your own words what the hell is agorism and what does it have to do with counter-economics, and how are those two related?
Right. So agorism is like it's a philosophy to achieve a strategy to achieve a free society within our lifetime. And the way we see it is, you need a consistent approach when you're doing anything. That's true of the natural sciences, it's true of the social sciences. And if you start with the non-aggression principle and you follow that out to its logical conclusion, you wind up with agorism inevitably. So in other words, if every libertarian lived true to the principles they preach, they would all be agorists. So that means that we believe in nonviolent civil disobedience, but in an entrepreneurial sense. So basically, the long and short of it is that we utilize the black and gray markets in order to subvert or undermine the state's rules and just the state apparatus in general. Some good examples real quick would be like Bitcoin undermines the Federal Reserve, 3D printing undermines gun laws, tokenized securities and assets undermines like FINRA and the SEC. And there's really a million examples. The best example probably ever done was probably Ross Ulbricht in the Silk Road, he actually read Jane Neal Schulman's book alongside Night, which is sort of the science fiction take on an agorist society, and he put it into practice. So yeah.
Well,
so
we discussed him though. He ended up in jail for life.
He did. And so that's a common thing I get. It's like, well, what about Ross? He wound up in jail. All you agorists are gonna go end up in prison forever? No, the idea is that we utilize operational security. Right. So what makes us different than sovereign citizens? If you think about it, the sovereign citizens and the agorists are really the only two factions of the liberty community who believe in sort of defiance. Like the central theme of their approach is defiance. But the
I don't know what sovereign citizens mean. Like, I don't know what that means. Can you?
Okay, so like the sovereign citizens are great. They're actually the real heroes. These are the people who they ride around with no license plates or registration or no license or anything whatsoever. And when they get pulled over, they just have a shootout with the cops and die. Or the cops die. Yeah, there's plenty of videos like that on YouTube where you can watch this. And I say, they're not wrong. I think that they're right for what they're doing, but I'd like to live a longer life than that. I don't want to like die on the side of like the highway over like a traffic ticket. So in order to combat that, we use operational security. So we use tools mainly provided to us by crypto anarchists, things like cryptography, encrypted communications, secure computing, stuff like that, to conceal and protect our identities. A great example would be 3dprintergoburr.com, where we allow cryptocurrency payments in order to facilitate non-KYC payments. So in other words, you can buy a 3D printer. As far as I know, it's the only place you can buy a 3D printer without having to access a KYC payment platform like Visa or a bank or PayPal or something like that. And that's just one aspect. There's a whole bunch of other ones. Agorists have been doing this for a long time. Like, I don't know how old your viewers are or what sort of socioeconomic class they're in, but if they're from one of the lower rungs of society like myself, they might remember like back in the day when, of course I didn't do this, but if you ever like bought drugs back in the day, back when we all had pagers and beepers, there would be like codes, right? So like you would send your dealer a code and he would know based on that code what you want and stuff like that. And he would respond back with a code telling you, and it would be all in code form, but you wouldn't be able to read it and decipher it, and you wouldn't know where to be and when and how much it was going to cost. So these are all just like tools that we use to sort of protect us. Ross's OPSEC sort of slipped a little bit, and that's what got him in trouble. See, Bitcoin isn't anonymous, as you well know. Bitcoin is pseudonymous, and that makes a huge difference. But at the time, blockchain analytics was like in its sort of infantile form, so we were able to stretch the ball a little bit further. But Ross sort of just stretched it a little too far.
Oh, so was he caught through blockchain analytics? They just traced it.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I remember reading the whole story, but I remember that they got him in like the San Francisco Public Library, and the whole idea was they needed to catch him with his computer open, because once he closed it, they wouldn't be able to open up all like his accounts and stuff like that. So they pretended there was a fight in the mall next to him, and he was distracted. And then some person just jumped on his laptop, and another person jumped on top of him.
Oh God.
Yeah. All for, by the way, building a website, right?
Right. Yeah.
He got a more strict sentence than Slobodan Milosevic or El Chapo. There are Nazis at Nuremberg. Karl Donitz, the last leader of Nazi Germany, received 10 years in prison, and Ross Ulbricht received double life plus 40 for building a website. Keep in mind, I know I don't want to get off topic, but keep in mind, he was making the drug market safer, right? Because now, rather than going down to the corner and buying dope, in a very dangerous environment, now you can look at the seller's ratings and reviews, and you could say, hey, this guy's got 400 5-star reviews on his dope, so I know I'm not the chances of me overdosing are slim to none. So he really sort of made he took the violence that the state put into the market, he took it out, and for that he was punished.
Yeah.
It really, I think the truth of it is that he was punished for using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange and showing the world that it wasn't just some sort of token internet novelty, that it had a real world use case as peer-to-peer cash. That's what really sort of ticked them off. And just another side note real quick, the judge who sentenced him to that ridiculous sentence, Catherine B. Forrest, is now working at a swanky New York law firm called Kravith. You guys can hit up on Twitter at CARAVITH and let them know what you think about them.
All right. So I guess a question that I would have then. So does that mean you're differentiating like a sovereign citizen from an agorist? So you would have a driver's license and license plates.
Look, I believe in that you should be as non-compliant as possible. So if you can come up, and of course I don't recommend any of this, this is all hypothetical, of course, but rather than driving around with no license, I would suggest maybe it would be better to drive around in a hypothetical world with a fake license, right? If you could pay off someone at the DMV, something like that, that would be a more ideal scenario. I know someone who actually got one of the ID making machines. This is years ago. I don't know if they still do it like this, but years ago when we were kids, one of our friends they knew someone at the DMV and actually brought home the ID printing machine so you could just spit out licenses at his house. So yeah, and you can go on the dark web, by the way, and of course I don't recommend this again, and you can find people doing this who have those machines at their house, and you can buy one right now.
But I assume that now, I mean, just not to get into the logistics here too much, but I assume that now, if I hand a cop my driver's license, he walks back to his patrol car, and there's a database. I mean, I live in California. There's a database, and my plastic can be perfect, but if it's not in the database,
I agree with you. Yeah, every state, we in Florida, we have this whole I don't know where my license is. It's we have this real ID thing where it's
we do too in California.
Orwellian, hooked up to some national system. So yeah, I don't know how much of that you can get away with nowadays, but the whole idea is to find black market solutions rather than to be openly defiant, because that's going to get you caught and in prison and go to jail, and to maintain strict OPSEC. Right, so I have an episode coming out of the Agora any day now. It's actually up on Odyssey. I just started an Odyssey channel, but I don't think it has any views. But it's all about I sit down with the guys from the Crypto Vigilante. We talk about Monero and R and how to use these tools and what really secure encrypted communications looks like. We're not talking about Telegram, the stuff that the hackers are using. Some really sort of deep OPSEC stuff. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that episode out.
So let me okay, I'm gonna put the normie hat on, because I am a bit of a normie, right? I'm a dad with a family, and I don't want to go to jail, and I don't want
me neither.
I'm not about to
no.
When you say, well, okay, well, do what you can, it's okay, well, I'll pay my landscaper under the table, sure. I can do that. Right.
That's not bad. That's more than half of these sheep are doing. Now, look, not to interrupt you, but everybody's risk tolerance is different. So if you're a 17-year-old and you can get away with murder and get charged as a child, your risk tolerance is much greater than someone who has kids and maybe they have a mortgage and all sorts of responsibilities and obligations. That person will have a much lower risk tolerance, and it's up to all of us to sort of properly gauge how much risk we can and are willing to take on in defense of liberty.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. How would you recommend, let's say you've got someone, they got 2.5 children and a mortgage and a wife or husband or whatever, got a spouse. What are the low-hanging fruit ways that they can minimize their, because I assume one of the goals here is to minimize your tax contribution, right? It's to minimize, it's like stop feeding the beast, I assume, is one of the goals here, right?
No doubt.
What are some low-hanging fruit ways that you would say, well, start doing these things? These are some things, and if you want to slowly increase from there, you can.
Yeah, so there are whole books that agorists have written on minimizing your tax burden that I can't think of the names on me right now, but one thing that I always recommend to people, and I think it's a very easy way to get started, is to become your own bank. Right. And this is a very low risk agorist activity, by the way. You're not going to wind up in prison, at least not right away. Not now. But become your own bank. Remove yourself from the stop using fiat currency, because number one, once you do that, you're no longer paying the worst tax of all, which is the inflation tax. Inflation is the worst tax because it's hidden. And this is what bankers mainly use to murder children in parts of the world that we can't pronounce. So become your own bank. And if you really want to get into it, use privacy coins, because it's not as easy to use privacy coins as it sounds, because retail adoption has been extremely stifled by regulators. But any dollar removed from the fiat system is a step in the right direction. If you can hide that money, I don't want to say hide and get in trouble, but if you can keep it away from the eyes of like prying federal agents, and you could do that using Monero or Pirate Chain, that's a great way to do it. You're not going to be able to spend your Monero or your Pirate Chain very easily, but if you're trying to park a large amount of money somewhere and you can't get to the Cayman Islands right away, and I don't even know if that works anymore, by the way. Like, I don't know if you can go to those foreign bank accounts, but you can always, anybody can have a Monero account. Anyone can have a Pirate Chain wallet. So that's a great way to sort of conceal your assets. Another great way to conceal like large amounts of money is to convert it into precious metals, right? That's another great way to sort of conceal your assets in a way that sort of works.
So all right, I'm gonna play some devil's advocate stuff, and so
yeah,
let's say, so obviously you can't unbank yourself if you've got a mortgage, and you probably get a paycheck by direct deposit, so you're gonna have a bank account. I mean, unless I want to get into entrepreneurship in a minute, but you're probably going to have a bank account. You're going to get paid direct deposit. You're going to have bills that you're going to have to pay from that account.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you're talking about is savings, which is good, but my immediate flag goes off and I say, okay, well, Bitcoin's done really well. There is no expectation that Bitcoin will continue to grow at the rate that it has. It could, but it's also very difficult in crypto to diversify and mitigate risk, because when Bitcoin goes up, Ethereum goes up. When Bitcoin goes down, Ethereum goes down. All the shit coins follow, right? That's just kind of how it works.
Right.
And so I look at this, I say, okay, well, if I've got $100,000 in savings, pretty conservatively, you can invest in index funds on Wall Street and way outperform. You don't have to worry about inflation. You can do pretty well. And you more than compensate for inflation, and you don't have this weird crypto risk, and you have accessibility to it. So are you losing upside? Like, how do you invest in crypto without giving up the upside that you would have if you were just staying in the normie world?
So a few things. I think number one, look what's going on with inflation. I think the people who stay in fiat are actually the ones who are losing, right? I mean, one Bitcoin is worth like 39,000 of these Federal Reserve notes. But that, right, at the end of the day, that's not actually what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about savings or using crypto the way that you're describing. I actually think that's the wrong way to use crypto. I think that if you hold a large amount of crypto, eventually you are going to get burnt. It's happened to me plenty of times. Learn from my mistakes. But What I'm talking about is I'm talking about using it the way Satoshi meant for it to be used. Use it in a disintermediative fashion, right? What Satoshi created was not an investment. He didn't create like a get rich quick scheme, right? That's horseshit. That's a bunch of maximalist bullshit. I'm talking about using peer-to-peer cash, right? Think about the value from an agorist perspective. No longer, like before, if you wanted to buy something that the state didn't want you to buy anything, and you used and look, let me put it like this: if you were if you try to facilitate a transaction between two parties who are not face to face, you need a third party to verify that you've sent the funds and that I've received them. In crypto, we do away with that third party, and we replace it with a decentralized network of miners. Sorry, I think I lost you on my headphones. Can you hear me?
I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did lose you on my headphones. Let me just try to reconnect.
Sure.
Sorry, somebody tried calling me. But so I'm talking about using it as peer-to-peer cash, right? So like if you want to facilitate a transaction between two people, you were in Seattle, one was in New York, you need a third party to do that. And of course, they're going to collect a small fee for that service. In crypto, we don't use a third party. We use a decentralized network of miners to sort of make an end run around that. So that's what makes it sort of uncensorable. So now, like, that's how Ross used it at the Silk Road, right? So before, whereas like Visa or PayPal would have to report that transaction to the feds, now there is nobody to report that transaction. There's no one that the feds can query and say, hey, what was Sal Mayweather buying last week? There's no one they can do that with.
Right.
So I'm talking about becoming your own bank and just sort of using it that way.
Now, transaction fees for Bitcoin, though, have been like, I remember recently they were super high. I don't know why, but I think like a year ago they skyrocketed.
Yeah, so Bitcoin BTC is no longer peer-to-peer cash for the reasons that you're describing. I use Bitcoin Cash because I think it's the most efficient medium of exchange that man has ever invented. If you think about it, Bitcoin Cash, the transaction fees are almost zero and they're almost instantaneous, right? The confirmation times are almost instant. So that means that it sort of works just like Cash would. And the other good thing about Bitcoin Cash that sort of Monero and Pirate Chain, some of these more privacy coins don't have, what we have that they don't, is retail adoption, right? Because regulators have their eyes on these privacy coins, exchanges, merchants, people have a hard time accepting them. That's not true with Bitcoin Cash. In fact, Bitcoin Cash is one of the most widely accepted cryptos available. That's why I use it. It's actually my primary medium of exchange. Any dollars I get go into my crypto wallet, and it becomes Bitcoin Cash, and that's where I have like a BitPay card where if I need to like do normie spending, I can do that. But all of my businesses accept crypto. We take in a large volume of crypto transactions, so a good deal of that is it's coming in crypto and it's going out in crypto, which is nice. It's nice to have a clean. The nicest part of it is that I don't have to. I have a clean conscience. I see that the children being murdered in Yemen, and I know that I'm doing as much as I possibly can to minimize my contribution to that.
Right. Okay, so all right, so with Bitcoin, you're an advocate of like Bitcoin Cash and stuff like that. And I guess you could vector through Monero if you wanted to add some privacy and to get yourself there. But
Yeah.
What's your when you have a dollar, how do you get it into Bitcoin Cash? I mean, if you use something like Coinbase, you're kind of just like, here I am, feds, track me here.
Yeah, for sure. It's super KYC on Coinbase. And a lot of those exchanges are just Binance is another one. A lot of them, well, they're all like that, really.
Well, I think most of them were coerced into doing that.
Yeah, it was never like that. Like this was like a recent like thing. It was only like 3-4 years ago this started. But so there's a few ways around that. Number one, you can use a coin mixer if you're using something like Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. You can just mix your coins up and then send them to a different wallet. That sort of obfuscates the transaction. But another way to do that, a better way to do this, is to use a peer-to-peer exchange like localcryptos.com, localcoinswap.com, where they connect to you. It's just like two people, some Joe Schmo wants to sell 1 Bitcoin Cash, and you're looking to buy 1 Bitcoin Cash. The two of you link up on that site. There's an escrow system involved. If you're going to use this, I really recommend sticking to that escrow system, because there's a lot of scammers out there. As long as you stick to the escrow, you'll be fine. But some people are like, oh, just send it to me now, and trust me, I'll send you the crypto. And then they always get burnt like that.
Yep.
So don't do that. But yeah. So use like local coin swap or local cryptos.
Okay. So when you say like amass precious metals, you're really talking, that's where you're talking about savings and just holding it on.
Exactly.
And that's where you're maybe losing an upside until inflation goes crazy.
Right. Well, that's the whole thing. It's like, how much of an upside are you losing? Because if you put your money in cash or in some capital market, and then that market, 10% of the value gets inflated away, and let's say your gold holdings have only lost 9%, you're still better off in precious metals than you were in inflated Federal Reserve notes. Of course, it depends on what those rates of appreciation and inflation are, but based on history, that's the way it seems like it's continuing to go.
Well, I mean, as someone who's invested in both gold and just kind of random stocks, I mean, the issue with gold has been, there's been doomsdayers who have been, and I would say I'm kind of among them. There's been doomsdayers who said like, hey, there's going to be hyperinflation. This is going to be crazy. We keep printing money. It's going to collapse eventually. And, you can take a bunch of money and stick it in gold and make the argument you're making. But the truth is, my wife, who just goes out and is like, I like Tesla, and buys Tesla stock, is like doing way better. Like
Right.
People, like regular people just investing in Spider Index or whatever, just doing way better. She could take it out and buy way more gold than she could have at the beginning. So
no doubt.
There's a timing question that I think freaks people out. Like someday that statement will be correct. You were better in gold, but I never know when that day is. And it like insanity just keeps compounding and compounding and compounding, and like no one seems to give a shit that we're printing money.
That's the whole thing about economics, right? Economics tells us what's going to happen. It doesn't tell us when it's going to happen. Otherwise, we would all be rich investors. We do know from Austrian business cycle theory that they can't keep this charade up forever. Eventually, there's going to be a collapse. And when that collapse comes, the people holding gold will be vindicated. But you're right. It's sort of like the same thing between being wrong and being really early on an investment or a trade. If you're really early, even if you're right, but you're really early, you're still going to lose money. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, and that's completely true.
Okay.
I still think there's a moral claim though, right? So like the people holding dollars, you guys are murdering kids. You're paying for Nancy Pelosi's her like, what was it, 400% salary increase over the last like few years. You're paying for Chuck Schumer's yacht. You're paying for the bombs that Obama used to drop on maternity wards, or the neonatal unit of a maternity ward of a charity hospital. You're paying for that. People holding gold and crypto aren't. So even if I go broke, I'd rather do that than to contribute to the murder of children. Like, it's very distant to people who use crypto or use like dollars. They don't think to themselves, oh yes, I'm paying for the murder of some child in Yemen. But that's really what's happening. And if you understand that, there's really no other solution but to minimize your exposure to fiat. You can't do away with it entirely. Of course, that's absurd. You have to live and you have to interact in the economy, but you should minimize that.
Okay, you look at this more as a principle of minimize it. You're going to have some. You're not going to be blamed for having some, but just
minimize your tax burden, and a huge piece of that is to minimize your exposure to fiat currency.
Okay, there's probably more we could go into, but I wanna change subjects a little bit. So before you came on, I went over Silk Road a little bit with people and said like, hey, this is what happened to Ross. This is one of the things that of concern about. And one of the things that I said was, I think the feds, in order to have a high standard of living or anywhere near where we are today, what you need is marketplaces. Like you can't, I can't, the example that I gave, which is maybe a crappy one, but like, I can't be like, well, I want a particular kind of apple, so I'm going to go out on my own and find who has that apple and offer them something for the apple and trade, or, buy the apple from someone. I want a store that has all the different things, and there's a marketplace, and like they have suppliers, and, and store has customers, and marketplaces are what enable our standard of living. There's no way we could have the standard of living we have today if we didn't have, frankly, access to global marketplace. I mean, that's what we've got. And it seems to me that the Feds target specifically the marketplace. So you said you thought Ross was targeted for using Bitcoin. My take was different. I thought Ross was targeted for being the guy who created the marketplace that they don't have access to. Like, they care about the money. They care about a marketplace. They need to have themselves inserted. And this is a marketplace. I think they would have gone after him if it wasn't illegal drugs, but it was produce. As it doesn't matter if it was produce outside of their control, i.e. through Bitcoin, he'd have been in trouble.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Okay. It was here's the whole thing. In order to have a money, in order for a commodity to be used as money, it has to have a non-monetary use case. And back in the day, we didn't have one for Bitcoin. It was just like, it was sort of like Dogecoin, that you just send $1 million to your friend and $1 million to this friend. And it was just sort of fun, right? And when Ross came along, he proved that wasn't the case. He's like, hey guys, look what I can do with this peer-to-peer cash. Look how we can actually use this. And that is what really pissed these people off. Like, it was the whole like challenging the state. That's what really pissed them off. It was the whole idea of like, oh my God, we actually have a real competitive currency to the Federal Reserve's monopoly. How do we stamp this out? We better like punish the hell out of this guy so nobody else gets this idea. Of course, it doesn't work. It just makes a mockery out of the justice system.
Right. So it made me start thinking, do we have now the technology to rebuild the Silk Road without a leader? And I think maybe we do. I think with DAOs, I want to get your thoughts on decentralized autonomous organizations, because it seems like we're maybe at the point where if someone wanted to, you could build a DAO with that was managed by people who had governance tokens, and that could be anonymous, and that DAO could run a marketplace. And I'm not sure there's anyone to go after at that point.
Yeah, there's not, and we have them. They're out there. There are a lot of them.
I don't spend a lot of time on the dark web, so I guess I'm looking in the wrong spot. I don't know.
Well, some of them aren't even on the dark web. Some of them are like on like a blockchain like platform. There's different, like, I'm trying to, like, there's one cryptocurrency called Apollo that's sort of like supposed to be, it's still being developed, but it's like this all-in-one blockchain, and they actually have a decentralized marketplace built into it. But there's other examples out there as well. Damn, I can't think of it. There's one called like Participle or something. I'll get you the name afterwards. But like, okay, we have them. They're out there, and people can transact in a sort of peer-to-peer fashion without the Feds knowing about this shit. And even those crypto exchanges I was telling you about, local CoinSwap, local cryptos, you don't have to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. You can buy and sell a couch or a gun or anything. They're a little bit more centralized. They have like a registered domain owner, so they can get in trouble and stuff like that. But yeah, we have these decentralized marketplaces, and they're out there.
Huh. I guess I've been looking. I haven't been looking, actually. So maybe I won't say I'm looking in the wrong spot. I just haven't been looking.
Well, the other thing too, the other interesting part about that is like the DAOs, the whole idea of these decentralized autonomous organizations. So I don't know if I told you this story, but the very first DAO ever, I was one of the original investors in Ethereum when Vitalik announced it in Miami, and it was like huge. We were all into it, and there was all of a sudden there was like this like flurry of like projects on ETH using smart contracts. It was like wild. It was like so crazy. Everybody was getting rich and going broke and getting rich and going broke. But we had the very first DAO ever Oh man, I remember it was like yesterday. It was so bad. I was so excited. I took all of my money and just poured it into the Dow, and I was sure it was going to blow up. And we woke up I think it was like a Saturday, if I remember correctly, in 2016, and like my wallet was at like zero. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And I guess like some hacker in Europe had found an erroneous line of code that he was able to exploit. And he was aware that most people who were invested in this were probably in America. So he waited till we were all asleep and just started draining our funds. By the time we woke up, we were all broke. And actually, Vitalik rolled the chain back to accommodate for that, which is why I tell people that Ethereum Classic is the real Ethereum, because that's the one that has the true ledger on it, and not Ethereum. Ethereum is the rolled back version. So we've come a long way since then. There's a lot more auditing that goes on now, hopefully. And some of my friends, actually, I was in Miami at a conference recently, and some of my friends in the law division here, one of these guys is like a professor of law at NYU, and there's a bunch of people at these conferences, and they were all telling me how they think this year will be the year that we can expect some sort of regulation from the government in terms of DAOs, right? Whether that be like how the tokens are used, if it's and all these groups are to get around this. They're saying this isn't a security token; it's a utility token, right? But it's the same shit, right. And the regulators are not going to. No, they're not going to care.
Yeah, I was just right before you came on. I was reading this briefing room fact sheet about President Biden's executive order on ensuring responsible development of digital assets, which is like, oh crap, right? I do have a friend who's deep into DeFi, and he claims that everyone's moving to Portugal. That Portugal is the place to be. They're the only country that's kind of leaving them alone. That's kind of a first world nation.
There's a lot of crypto people over there. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of crypto people over there. I don't know. I'm not sure how concerned I am about all of this, to be honest with you. I've always felt, even from the very, very early days in crypto, I always thought that this was part of it. Like, I expected this. This was part of my long-term vision from day one. Of course, they're not going to give up the monopoly on currency easily.
Right.
Who thought that who would do that? If you had a monopoly on printing money, are you going to give that up easily? Of course not. You're going to do anything you possibly can. You're going to shame them. You're going to make up stories. You're going to lie. You're going to murder. You're going to steal. That's exactly what we're seeing now. It's sort of like a fish out of water gasping for air. But eventually that fish is going to die. And really, this is what the Federal Reserve is going through right now, just sort of convulsions of a dying bank.
Okay. So I wanna switch topics a little bit because I think one thing that I like. So as you're describing agorism, is it agorism or agorism?
Potato. I say agorism because that's the root of the word is agora, from the Greek agora.
Okay. Well, as you're describing agorism, I mean, it's especially when it's this, there's this recognition that hey, everyone has this different risk profile, and like I'm not expecting you to not get a driver's license and to like never have any bank account or whatever. Like there's stuff you got to do. You got a family and whatever. I one of the things I like, I'm warming up to it. I heard you talk about what was wrong with ANCAPs recently, and I had always described myself as an ANCAP, although I haven't used that term in a while. And a lot of the things you said, I was like, well, that's not ANCAP, or at least it's not me. Maybe it's ANCAP. I don't know. So I'm warming up to agorism generally because I like the end goal is the same. It's a voluntary society, and the mechanism seems to be interesting. I am concerned. I mean, I laid out some of the concerns with like people like Ross going to jail and like how much you can actually get away with this, and we need marketplaces and all that stuff. But one of the things I really like about it is it encourages entrepreneurship. And I've been an entrepreneur for my almost, not quite my entire career, but almost my entire career. And I think, I don't know if people know this about me, but like I've run business incubators. I've probably advised, I mean, hundreds of startups, and sat on boards and done all this stuff. And I really like early stage startups, and I really like entrepreneurs. And my wife is also an entrepreneur, and we view it almost as a curse because it's the kind of thing where, like, we look at each other sometimes and you're like, we could both make way more money if we just went to Google and worked for Google. Like, this is ridiculous. But we can't bring ourselves to not run businesses, and like, it's just what we do. And there's something and even though the economic thing doesn't make sense, like, maybe I should go to work for Google, not that they would take me anymore. Still with our kids, we're like, well, teaching them some entrepreneurship stuff. And my daughter, when she was 10, had her first quote company that she did with her friends, and had a cap table, and like managed it, and
Good.
But my point is, what I love about entrepreneurship is I think entrepreneurship is to economics in some sense, or into money, or to economics, what being a farmer is to eating, and going to the store. Like, people go to the store and just buy packaged chicken, right? And they're like, I don't want to know what happens. Okay, fine. But actually what happens is very difficult. It's like, it's not easy to maybe raise chickens and do this and slaughter them. But like, there's a whole process that needs to be done. In order for you to eat, someone has to do that process. And I view entrepreneurship as the economic version of that, where if you get a job, someone just says, meet this metric, you get paid. It's the entrepreneur who's got to be like, I need to make sure that people want this. It's viable. We can run the business. We can meet all, like, there's a bazillion moving parts. It's great for generalists who just like to dive in and get into things. And I think it's ultimately good for being a self-sufficient human being, to know that I can go out into the world with nothing, and there are other human beings out in the world, and I can figure out a way to provide value to those human beings so they will voluntarily give me their hard-earned value back. And I think being able to solve that problem is really, really good for self-esteem, self-sufficiency, and confidence. And it's super not easy. So I guess this is just like a soliloquy to entrepreneurship, but my understanding is Agorism is very focused on entrepreneurship, not only for, economic self-sufficiency, but also, can you talk about the impact you can have as an entrepreneur in being an agorist?
Yeah, so there is a really, really long tradition in Austrian economics that sort of the entrepreneur is sort of the centerpiece of Austrian economics. This is going back to Mises and Israel Kirzner, Per Byland, Peter Klein, all professors of entrepreneurship who specialize in Austrian economics. And what these guys tell us is that in a free market, it's the entrepreneur who allocates resources, right? So if your goal is to allocate resources away from the government, you need to be an agorist to do that. So really, the one definition I always give people, because it's so simple and they really can grasp it very easily, is that agorism is just a unique form of entrepreneurship where we seek not only profits, but also disruption. That's really all agorism is, right? We want profits, of course, but we also want to disrupt the government. And obviously we do that through entrepreneurship. And yeah, like I said, that's how you allocate resources in a market economy. So it's necessary. But one of the keys here is, and I get a lot of pushback from the ANCAPs here, is that wage work is wage slavery. And they don't understand this, because if you have a portion of your earnings automatically deducted from you, automatically taken from you before you get it, and somebody else keeps it, that's called slavery. In the antebellum South, they took 95%. Maybe you got shelter and some bread and water, but they kept the overwhelming majority. Now, the slave masters in Washington, D.C., maybe they let you keep 50, 60%, or 40, maybe sometimes it's less, depending on how much you earn. So it's just a matter of degree. You're still a slave, though. It's just a matter of degree. With the entrepreneur, that's not the case. With the entrepreneur, you get all of your money, and then it's up to you to pay taxes how you see fit. So going back to the minimization of your tax burden, a great way to do that is to be an entrepreneur. And not only that, but you have the ability to have a sort of a multiplier effect, because now you can not only minimize your own tax burden, but also that of your employees.
I think the only thing I'll push back on wage slave is I think when most people say wage slave, or at least a lot of normies say wage slave, they imply that it's the boss who's the master. And you're using wage slave to say, well, it's the federal government that's the master, and which is true, 100% true. But wage slave is thrown around to vilify entrepreneurs, actually.
Yeah. So there's actually there's a lot of I'll get hell for this, but there's a lot of similarities between Marxism and Agorism. Okay, in the sense that we both believe that there's this sort of binary class division. Right? We believe that the working class is in fact being exploited, but the Marxists got it. They identified the plot of the play correctly. They just miscast the characters. So the worker is being exploited, but they're not being exploited by the entrepreneur. They're being exploited by politicians, by the political class. They're being plundered by the political class. And we know this from the work of Eugene von Baewerk, who pointed out that the entrepreneur, not only does the entrepreneur not exploit the worker, in fact, they save them. Because if you think about it, in a worker-owned collective, in some sort of collectively owned venture, some sort of business venture, all of the workers would have to stop eating, stop going out to the bar at night, save up their money, each of them, and pull it together for the capital goods and resources necessary to get this venture off the ground. Whereas the entrepreneur has already done that. He bears that burden for them. So the entrepreneur actually plays a heroic role in regard to the worker, whereas Marx thought we exploited them. It's the exact opposite.
Right. And as someone in chat points out, workers are exploited by Marxists. Yeah, I think that what ends up happening is they elevate the politicians, and but those are the exploiters.
Right. And those are the Marxists. Right.
Right. Yeah, I see why people push back on that, but I probably wouldn't have described it exactly that way, but I don't have a problem with your description. I think it makes sense. The more that I start talking about and have been talking about just voluntarism and people being individualism philosophically and people being free to do their own thing, and the more we start talking about application of philosophy to politics, the more it becomes this discussion of oppressors versus oppressed, which I know is this horrible critical theory idea. I know it's kind of it sounds very bad, and I'm not saying judge people based on they're not good because you think that they're this, or you can't just make labels, but there is a real issue here, which is why I think populism is on the rise. You're seeing people on the right and left, regular people being united on the right and left, precisely because we're starting to wake up to this idea that, hey, all of these people with a monopoly on the use of force sitting in Washington, D.C. are exploiting us. They're all fucking us over. Maybe they're saying different things while they do it, and they call us different names, or they whisper different sweet nothings into our ears. But at the end of the day, we're all getting fucked by the same class of people who have a monopoly on the use of force, believe it is their right because through voting that gives them the authority to tell us how to run our lives and to regulate us and to manage us like we're tax cattle.
See, you're more optimistic than I am. I don't think that the average Republican or Democrat realizes that yet. I think that the Democrats think that their enemy is like the rich and Republicans, and the Republicans think that their enemy is the Democrats. And as long as they maintain that illusion, the state is going to stay in power. The worst thing for them is that we realize that there actually is that binary class division, the plundered versus the plunderers. Once people do realize that, then they're in for a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So you don't. I agree that I think that left-right narrative, the Republican Democrat narrative, is actually. Uh, I'm not gonna like put my tinfoil hat on and say it was a conspiracy that was intentionally foisted upon us some time ago, but it is an awfully convenient distraction that allows the uniparty to stay in control, where we think we can. It's like there's two farmers fighting to be our in charge of the tax farm, and all the tax cattle get to vote for which farmer, and they make speeches, and they tell you we're going to take care of you better, and we care about your freedom to chew on grass over here, and we care about your freedom to drink from the water bin over there but not chew on grass over here, and whatever it is. And we vote and we think we've got control, and no one is having the conversation of why the fuck are we on a farm.
Yeah, look, in the old days, marauding gangs would fight for control over some geographical territory, and periodically another gang would come in and wipe them out, and then it would change hands again, and so on and so forth. And eventually they just got together and said, look, let's just create some sort of power sharing agreement, right? Instead of like fighting all the time, let's create some sort of power sharing agreement. And now we're at the stage, 2020 years later, where the main power sharing agreement is every 4 years, maybe you get a shot, maybe we get a shot, but we'll leave it up to the masses to decide. This way they don't get too upset with us. But it's still, like you said, we're still like monkeys in a zoo. And I think agorists are the only ones out there who are saying, hey, guys, we need to get back to the Congo. Right? Let's get the hell out of here. Let's get back to the jungle. I don't care who the zookeeper is. I want to get back to the jungle.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think a lot of people are scared of the jungle in that analogy, right? They're scared.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Look, with freedom comes personal responsibility. And that scares the hell out of some of these indoctrinated people.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess is there anything else that we're kind of missing on agorism or agorism in terms of what regular people can start doing? I just want to. The reason for this discussion, just so you know why I decided to start exploring this, we had a lot of people in our community start saying, "Hey, talk about building kind of." Just like there's the alternate tech conversations, like talk about alternate communities. Can we start? There's been a lot of talk about like how do we get together and like do something outside of the system in some way so we can hang out with other people who care about liberty and stop being subject to all these stupid laws, and like how can we insulate ourselves in some way? And I thought a discussion with you is a good way to kick stuff off, because it's about economics, which is one of the most important factors there, which is like, okay, how do we get along? Do you have to have, for this to work well, do you envision like we have to have communities of people who physically are located near each other and get to know each other? Is that really the only way in a surveillance state that this can kind of grow?
Not at all. In fact, we agorists generally oppose that. So we call that we call that anarcho-Zionism. So things like seasteading, private cities, the Free State Project, things like that would sort of fall into this category. We're opposed to all of that because it doesn't make much sense to, sort of consolidate all libertarians in one geographic area just to make it easier for the state to murder all of us. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us. The problem with these strategies, at the end of the day, we can boil it down to this. They all rely on the moral restraint of politicians to not genocide you. And we know from history that politicians have no moral restraints, right? They murdered 700,000 people in the Civil War. So they don't care about, the state of New Hampshire seceding or not. They'll kill everybody in New Hampshire just to make a point. And they would kill more if they had to. So no, I don't believe that like forming alternative cities and states and communities, that's not a viable solution. The only solution, I get a lot of people get upset about this, but the only solution is counter-economics. You're not going to vote your way out of it. You're not going to run for governor as a third-party candidate. You're not going to run as paleo for mayor. Your local office isn't going to change this. None of that shit is going to work. We've been trying it for years. The only way out of this, we know that it works, is agorism. No other philosophy, no other political philosophy has had as much success Konkin's been dead since 2004, so it's been what, 18 years, something like that. It hasn't even been that long. So look at all we've accomplished since then. Airbnb and Uber, we've got the Bitcoin white paper, the 3D printed gun, we're tokenizing buildings, we're tokenizing Picassos at this point. We have decentralized exchanges and privacy coins and all sorts of stuff. Look at the amount of success that the Marxists have had. Marx has been dead for centuries. They've had zero success. The same is true of all these different political philosophies. None of them have had an inkling of the success that we've had, and it's very young. And one other quick way to look at that, like as to why agorism is the only solution, if you think about it, and this is an analogy that I like to use. You might have heard me use it before, but like, imagine like when Galileo was like, "Hey guys, I've got this new theory. It's a little bit more logically consistent than Ptolemy's version of the universe, but in my version of the universe, the Earth isn't the center of the galaxy or the center of the universe." Everyone's like, "Hey Galileo, why are you so arrogant? Why do you think it can only be a heliocentric model? How come we can't have it both ways, right? How come we can't have voting and agorism? How come we can't have heliocentrism and geocentrism?" It's like, no, there's only one logically consistent philosophy. And that's true of the natural sciences, it's true of the social sciences, it's true of everything. And in the realm of politics and economics, the one true philosophy is agorism. We found it, but it's brand new, so people don't know that we found it yet. It's our job to make sure that they know about it and that they're aware of it.
I would agree with you philosophically that there is only one correct answer. Where I stumble, I think, is that answer. The practicality of that answer relies on psychology, which is really not well. I don't understand, and like I'm afraid to predict exactly who will do what and whatever. So like I think I get the logical consistency from, and I even understand the principles of like I get that, but there are examples of states that have seceded, just not from the U.S. Like we have way more countries now than we ever did. Now sometimes Russia goes and invades one of them, right? Like sometimes, or the U.S. does. Like sometimes
but
that doesn't.
Governments. They'll have governments though. So it's like, so when you secede, you just turn over into another government. Whereas counter-economics eradicates the state's influence in that particular area of your life, right? So like a great example, probably the only example of a successful counter-economic revolution was Gandhi, right? Gandhi, by using civil disobedience, he took everybody to the ocean. They all got their own salt. They broke the British salt monopoly in the Raj in India, and the British had to leave India. If they left it there, they would have been great. But instead, they started electing communists, and unfortunately, India was cursed with decades of poverty after that. They're still trying to crawl their way out of. They're still answering for those sins.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I think the only ultimate solution involves a change in the culture. And so one thing I do like about agorism is it does help foster cultural change. People get used to the like, oh, I don't need the state for this. I don't need the state for that. I don't need to do this. And like it does help foster a cultural change, because I think you can't actually have the free society that we imagine if most of the people in that society don't like freedom. They don't want that responsibility. They don't like the liberty is not that important to them. They don't want responsibility. They want someone to be in control. If that's what most of society is like, they'll put someone in control. They'll make sure it happens.
Yeah. So like a few things there. I agree to an extent. I think that how large of a role culture plays, I'm not sure, but I do think that agorism encourages a more stable culture. And I think that a lot of culture, libertarians get this wrong. I think that we think that what's the common saying, that culture is politics is downstream from culture, is what everybody tells you. I think it's just the opposite.
That's the Breitbart saying is politics is downstream from culture. Yeah.
I think that culture, I think it's just the opposite, right? And the reason why is because culture is by and large a product of Federal Reserve policy, right? They, by setting the interest rate, by playing with the supply of money, they sort of manipulate our time preferences. So if everybody's hooked on this depreciating fiat currency, then they're more likely to be spendthrifts, or they're more likely to spend their money quickly. Whereas if you use a sound money like crypto or gold that we were describing before, you're like, oh man, I don't want to spend this. I want to hold on to it because who knows what it's going to be worth tomorrow. So that sort of encourages less risky behavior and encourages savings for capital, which can be used to start businesses and engage in entrepreneurship in the future. None of that happens in a sort of it's less likely to happen in a fiat monetary system. So you're definitely more likely to have a better culture. As far as the extent to which that culture plays, I really think that at the end of the day, people are going to adopt these ideas we're not going to convince people to become like Rothbardian libertarians. That's absurd, right? Right. This is a sort of utopian fantasy that a lot of LP types have. They think that we're going to convince everybody to be Ron Paul.
It's not the perfect argument, and then they're all going to be
Yeah, it's just not going to happen. So like, the way to do this is through economic incentive, right? More people have adopted cryptocurrency and Bitcoin because they think it's going to get them rich than they have adopted because they read Rothbard, right? They didn't read Mises's theory of money and credit and like, oh geez, I better buy Bitcoin. No, they're like, oh man, my neighbor, that kid from the party last night, got rich. He was telling me how much money he made. I better buy some. So it's through economic incentive that people are going to adopt these measures. Same thing is true with 3D printing. My sales, I guess, I don't even know if I should say this, but my sales go up every time Joe Biden mentions gun control. So it's like, people have a self-interest at mind, right? And that's what they're going to use to make these decisions and to engage in the agora.
I think I don't know if it was you that I might have had this conversation with you already, but the politics is downstream from culture. When I first heard that, I liked it. And then I said, well, no, culture. Well, I said, okay, well, culture is actually downstream from philosophy, which I do think is true. But and it might have been with you. It might have been someone else. Someone kind of challenged that a little bit. And I said, okay, wait a minute. I think really what's happening is there is a feedback loop that goes all the way back from politics, all the way back to philosophy and culture, both. And I think one of the most obvious examples of that is, let me start by saying the reason that I say culture is downstream from philosophy is philosophy tells you your values, and like then you like implement them culturally, and then that affects who you vote for, and like in a very short time cycle that makes sense. But you can also find examples of politics funded large amounts of really crappy philosophy at universities all across the country for decades and decades and decades, and the philosophy got worse and worse and worse, and it trickled into everything else, bled out, became part of culture. People got jobs at magazines and books and social media, and like it's this feedback. Like, okay, yeah, but why was so much money? Why does the University of Texas at Austin have 100 people in their diversity, whatever inclusion department? Like, why are they paying that? And the ultimate answer is there actually was politics behind this entire thing. So I think there is a very valid argument to be made here that this is a feedback loop. And anything that we can do to break that feedback loop and maybe just changing people's behavior does start to break it, because it's hard to be arguing against stuff that you're doing. Right.
I agree with you. I just play devil's advocate. I would say that even behind those politicians, there are bankers. But I generally do agree.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we left out banking, but yes.
I think that you're right. I think you're right to point out the crucial role played by the educational system, because in influencing our culture. And there's no shortage of examples to be seen from this. Look at how they've turned Abraham Lincoln into a saint, right? A man who massacred almost 1 million of his own people. He was the most hated politician of his time, and they've turned him into a saint, and that was only possible through a monopoly of the public school system. Just like a lot of this social justice warrior bullshit is only possible through, the public schooling system, like you're saying.
Right.
But even behind those moves, at some point there was like an economic purpose that we can find. Rothbard tells us when we look at these historical events, always look for the individual motivations, and man, it's always a dollar behind it. Isn't it funny?
Yeah, that is a really good point, and I think we could go on for another 2 hours, so I won't. But like we could go for a while talking about the effect that money, and I don't remember if I said this before you joined today or not, but I definitely said it today. The effect of giving or of having a monopolistic control on currency,
Insane.
it trickles down to everything. It literally affects every single thing. And people just don't understand that. So.
There's entire I don't know if anybody out there is like a student of history. You'll probably be aware that there's different like paradigms that people use that they can see historical events through. So like if you're into there's a lot of people who are into geopolitics. Everything that happens in the world is like comes out of like the geopolitical arena for them, right? Like there's always a geopolitical response. At the end of the day, I think, I guess I should back up. There's a lot of people who see their historical paradigm is inflation. And you can actually explain a lot of historical events by looking at like the money supply. A good example of this, and I'm not a fan of this, guys. I don't believe in his book. I don't believe in any of it. But in the book, The Bitcoin Standards, Saifedean Ammous actually does a decent job going through the monetary history and showing how inflation has sort of created the rise and fall of societies. And then societies were built up on sound money, and they collapsed on inflationary paper notes. And that's a driving force in history that can explain so many civilizations. And I think that maybe in 500 years, they're going to be looking back at our time saying, hey, obviously this was going to happen. They were inflating away their currency.
Right. Yeah. I mean, truth, Rome, someone in chat writes the Weimar Republic. That's also true. I mean, we see it a lot.
Even in like African societies, like Ammous goes through like, island societies and like all sorts of them. And it's really interesting how that is the case.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks, Sal, for this chat. It's a great conversation. It's always fun to talk to you. I'm going to have you back to get in more in depth on some stuff. Maybe we'll have some crypto conversations. There's just a lot. There's a lot going on, and I do have I have a lot of respect for agorism, and I'm starting to really get okay. This seems to be directionally correct. Maybe I don't understand all of it, and I haven't read all the agorist stuff, but this seems to be directionally correct. And look, I think a lot of us at the end of the day know that the utopia that everyone's hoping for is not going to happen anytime soon. Like, we're not going to suddenly be like, hey, this borderland, here's a spot where it's all voluntarism. Like, that's not going to happen, but we can move there, and we can make our lives individually more and more voluntary and more outside of the main system. And maybe, who knows?
Well, look, we're not going to be able to create this voluntary global community. It's not going to happen. It's just a utopian fantasy. It's not going to happen. But you can create that change in your life right now, today. To me, that's the most beautiful thing about agorism, is that the debate is over. There's no more politicking. There's no more canvassing neighborhoods, working phone banks. As soon as you accept agorism, you're free. That's it. That's it. You are at that point. You've reclaimed your liberty. That's the whole thing about liberty. It doesn't belong to the president. The president can't give you your freedom back. The congressman, the senator, the Supreme Court. Your freedom is yours and yours alone, and only you can claim it. And ultimately, that is agorism. That's if you do that, you wind up at agorism, and that's the whole key to me. It's all the instantaneous liberation is what I think is most attractive to people.
Yeah, and it sounds much more psychologically healthy. It's a much more psychologically healthy way to live and be like, look, yeah, I'm surrounded by thugs and creeps.
Yeah, right.
I can live my life
Right.
with liberty as much as I can, and that's what my
As
focus
much as
is going to be.
possible. And one more point,
Yeah.
I know you want to wrap up. One more point, like think about
Mhm.
all the different realms of counter-economics, right? 3D printing, cryptocurrency, tokens, growing your own food. We didn't even get a chance to talk about that. So many different things. Anything really can be counter-economic if it's done in a way that's sort of disruptive towards the state. So there's so many areas that are available for entrepreneurship, and so many ways that people can get involved and engage in this philosophy, that it's inevitable that we win. I don't know if everybody's going to look back and say, "Oh, the Agorists won," but I think maybe in 1,000 years or 500 years, they're going to say, "Yeah, look, the Agorists won."
Yeah. Yeah, and look, we did have a conversation about growing your own food beforehand, and I said, look, I don't want to grow my own food. I'm a horrible gardener, but I do like the idea of a local farmer who,
Yeah.
sure, I'll give you Bitcoin Cash for some stuff, and let's just done, right?
Not only that, but look at the supply chain shortages that we're having. It's a good time to have some farmers and ranchers who are good friends of yours, right? So when I
Yeah.
first came to Florida, I started immediately. When I'm looking for farmers and ranchers, I met a bunch of people, and when the grocery store's out of meat, I still have meat, right?
Yep.
There's an orange grove about 20 minutes away from me. It has the most delicious orange juice in the world. I'm not getting the pesticide shit from the store, and I know it's going to be there. I know where to go if if the shelves are empty. I know where that guy's address is. I know where the orange trees are, right? So I can go
Yep.
there. I have silver if the money goes bad. So it's securing your own food supply is another key aspect of making yourself resilient against the state. But that's a topic for
Yeah.
another day.
No, it is, but it's good, and there's a lot to cover here. But like I said, what I really
There's
like
so
about it is
much.
I like that individual sovereignty aspect. That, like, look, you're taking charge of your own life, and you don't. It's not like you're saying, well, I'll only be happy and free after all this stuff that's never going to happen happens. It's like, well,
Right.
it's never going to happen. So
That's what Kurt Weiland says, right? He's got this great article that I included in my book where he says, I've only got 70 to 80 years on this planet, and that's with a whole lot of luck. He's like, do I want to spend that limited time trying to convince everybody that they're slaves? Like, if you can't see your chains by now, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for you. If you don't realize that you're a slave, I can't help you. And this is what Thoreau says in Essay on Civil Disobedience, right? He basically says the same thing. He's like, I'm not here to sort of like negotiate with people. I'm here as a man in this world to live free now, today, not to wait and do it in the future. So like, yeah, and stop the voting, stop the politicking, and just live free now. And the way to do that is through agorism. If you guys want to learn more, check out Sam Konkin's book, New Libertarian Manifesto, the Agorist Primer. I've got a book called Anti-Politics. There's a plethora of material. There's a great book called Alongside Night by J. Neil Schulman. They turned it into a terrible movie starring Kevin Sorbo that you can watch for free online. If you're not doing anything tonight after this, watch it. It's free online. It's actually pretty entertaining, but it'll give you a good idea of what an agorist society looks like and what the agorist revolution entails.
Yeah, thank you for that. Tell people how they can find you online, how they can support stuff you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm on all your different social media platforms, like Sal the Agorist or just at Sally Mayweather. I'm not hard to find. Twitter, Snap, Insta. My Facebook page is Print Guns Not Money. That's grown pretty big. Other than that, that's really it. Other than that, check out sallyagorist.com for updates on my podcasts and blog. You can check out agorithreads.com for libertarian and anarchist apparel, and 3dprintergoburr.com for 3D printers and 3D printing supplies. Of course, you can pay with cryptocurrency to avoid having to access those KYC payment platforms.
I'm going to have you back to talk about 3D printing guns at some point, because
we got to do it, because I'm late. I was late today, so I got to make up for this.
Yeah. No, it's cool, and that's a separate topic even, because yeah, I really like. I don't know how that gets stopped, which I love. Like, I don't know how
it doesn't. It doesn't.
How do you police that? I don't think you do.
And wait until you hear the advances that we've made just in the last 6 weeks. I mean, it's absolutely crazy.
Oh wow. Okay.
Absolutely
All right.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to have that conversation. So we'll
Yeah,
have you back for that.
definitely.
So, thanks everyone for watching. Thank you for not forgetting to subscribe and share the content. Don't forget to go to unsafespace.com to support the show. You can support with Bitcoin and Ethereum, although maybe we should add Bitcoin Cash because transaction fees are high for both of those blockchains, the Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Insane.
Yeah, this show will be back next Wednesday with some more solo application of philosophy stuff. Tomorrow, I think we're going to have a great reset show with comics division. Friday, there'll be a genetically modified version of the Token Minority Report, which we're going to try and experiment with. And Beverly's going to be the one on screen. And then Monday, I'll be back with Narrative Dissonance. We have reporters from Breitbart and Post Millennial joining on Monday. So I will see you then. Until then, take care, everyone. Sal, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you're new to Unsafe Space, check out our deep content library that includes discussions with everyone from James Lindsay to Brett Weinstein. And please consider helping to fund our work by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on a variety of social media platforms, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space Discord server, which is open to financial supporters at any level. We hope to see you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production may be Russian propaganda. The following individuals are suspected of questioning one or more official narratives. Experts agree that there is an epidemic of sexually uninformed 5-year-olds, and Florida is the cause. Here's an idea: why not stop complaining and buy a Tesla? I'm sorry, there is no record of a COVID pandemic. You must be mistaken. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Science, scientific, and scientifically are registered trademarks of the World Economic Forum. Unauthorized use is prohibited. Computer voice courtesy. Never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.